Hi, my name is Kaylee Miller, and I'm a violist, music educator, movement educator, and founder of the Musicians Health Collective, which is a blog that compiles anatomy, information, movement thoughts, general thoughts about teaching, things for both musicians and non-musicians alike. I've resisted making video content for many years, but after presenting at a few different conferences, offering workshops, and working for yoga teacher trainings, it's become clear that I need to get over my video fear and plunge solidly into the mid-2000s. So that being said, we're just starting with a quick crash course on shoulders. So I have a disembodied left arm here. We have three bones that primarily make up our shoulder girdle. The first is the clavicle, or the collarbone. The second is the scapula, also known as the shoulder blade on the back of the body. And then this third bone, the humerus. Now the first thing to note is that whole arm only attaches to the rest of your skeleton in one bony joint here. So it's where the clavicle meets the sternum, sternoclavicular joint. So walk your fingers over to one of your clavicles, find this little divot in the center, and just start to move the bottom arm and just feel all the movement that's available, but also understanding that that's the only bony landmark where these two bones between the rest of your body and your arm connect. Now from there, walk your fingers out towards your arm bone and get a sense of if it's a straight line, if they're kind of sticky outy points. One of the things you'll realize, sticky outy point is a very technical anatomy term, but there's little outcroppings in this scapula that bring the front and the back together and create a socket for the arm bone. So for a long time, I had this idea that the scapula is just like a flat bone that lives in a vacuum. Not true, it turns out. And so as you walk your fingers out along your collarbone, this is a very short collarbone or a very small person, you'll find other little bony outcroppings that may be your collarbone, but may also be part of your scapula where different muscles and soft tissues attach. Now keep walking your fingers out until you get solidly on your arm bone or your humerus. And then I'm putting down my disembodied arm and just moving the arm. See if you can move it first by yourself and without moving the shoulder and the clavicle. And you'll see that there's some movement available. Now start to move the arm in bigger circles and you'll realize that the whole unit, arm bone, clavicle, scapula, have to move together. Now the reason I bring this up, it may be super obvious to you and that's great. For a long time, I heard those cues of shoulders down, clavicles down, collarbones down, and I really overly depressed my whole shoulder girdle. So I just want us to unpack that idea and maybe reframe the way that we use our language in that context. Now bring your arm to the back of your body, find your shoulder blade, and then same thing, just start to move the arm. Small motions, you can do swinging side to side, and just get a sense of when your scapula needs to move. So for me, if I'm imagining I'm snow angeling in the sand on a cool, wintry Miami day, as opposed to a hot, humid day like today, there's a point where my clavicle and my shoulder blade need to lift up to support the arm overhead. So the other thing is if we realize that the whole shoulder girdle moves together, maybe those old outdated cues of shoulders up, shoulders down are really not serving our clients. So the last thing to kind of realize here is that there's a lot of movement available in your shoulder. So we often are told in an anatomy class that the shoulder is a ball and socket joint, much like the hip joint, which is true in that this is a spherical bone and there's a pocket, but what you start to realize, and the metal casing here is sort of suspending that, but the amount of surface area on the shoulder blade that's available for this to fit into is very small. So you can barely see, but it's about a quarter of contact between this ball and socket of the arm bone and the scapula. So what that means is that there's a ton of range of motion. There's also a ton of instability, and it means that our muscles, our ligaments, all of our soft tissues have to work really hard to support us Now, what I also realized earlier today is that my arm bone here likes to sometimes pop out. It dislocates, it does strange things. But you just get a sense, this is a rotator cuff, this is now the right shoulder, totally different shaped collarbone, obviously a different model. But you see that there's a whole range of different white mysterious ligaments and red muscles, which are not what your body looks like in the real world. But it's just a visual depiction. You see that there's a lot of stuff there to support this arm bone sitting in the socket. So all I really want you to take away from this is understanding there's three bones: your clavicle, your scapula, and your humerus, aka collarbone, shoulder blade, arm bone. There are actually three joints, which I kind of alluded to, but I'll just clarify. It's where your collarbone meets your sternoclavicular joint. There's where your collarbone, let me get my disembodied arm because it's clear, where we've now moved back to the left side, where your collarbone connects with the scapula, a acromioclavicular joint. It's kind of a sticky outy part over here. And then the last joint is where this arm bone connects with the very small socket of your shoulder, known as the glenohumeral joint. Now, with all of this information, I don't really care if you use the correct names. I just want to be accurate and provide the best information. But whatever you teach, whether it's music or movement, just have this idea of buoyancy in the arms and understanding that everything moves together. If you are a musician, I'd encourage you to try to play your instrument in kind of an invisible way. So let's say I've got an invisible viola on my left side. My right arm's going to come around and just palpate my shoulder as I play and just get a sense of what's going on in my clavicle, how much movement is coming from the arm bone. And depending on how I angle my instrument, forwards, back, side to side, realize that there's a lot of play in the shoulder. Now, you may play a completely different instrument. You may piano, voice, a vocal instrument, but whatever you do often, give it a try. Just see if you can mimic that motion without the actual object. And just use the other hand to palpate and investigate and see if you can put this anatomy into context in your body and get maybe a broader and more accurate sense of embodied shoulder anatomy. Thank you so much for watching.